Thank you all for attending our webinar today. Our presentation today is geared primarily for law enforcement traffic officers that want to learn a little bit more about vehicle crash data. It's designed for those that have heard of crash data and crash data retrieval, but don't really have much experience with it. We'll be providing basic information on the subject today. In looking at the registration list, we see a lot of attendees that may be in private practice investigations, insurance companies, or other industries that may use crash data also. We know some of you have varying experience with EDR tools, ranging from being maybe a novice to some experts in the field that are joining us here today as well. All are welcome, but we'll be discussing things in very basic terms today. This technology has evolved over the years, and there are exceptions as to the function of and operation of event data recorders. So for today's presentation, we'll be speaking in terms of generally, typically, and most likely throughout the presentation. We hope everyone walks away knowing a little bit more than they did today. This presentation should last about 45 minutes long. You may have some questions along the way, and we'd be happy to answer those the best that we can. We do ask that you take some notes and save your questions for a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. Slide numbers will be located in a yellow box on each slide if you want to reference a particular slide to your question. And again, please save your questions towards the end. We thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. We'll start with some introductions. My name's Scott Christensen. I've been with the Crash Data Group for just over 3 years. My primary job here is to provide support to our law enforcement customers, but I deal with all of our customers as well. I recognized a few names on the registration list, so to those of you I've gotten to know over the last couple of years and have talked to, hello and thanks for joining us. I'm a retired police officer. I worked for a city police department here in Southern California for 23 years, 18 of which was a traffic accident investigator, traffic accident reconstructionist. So I'm pretty familiar with vehicle crash data and how it can be applied to traffic investigations. Kent Boots is joining me today, and Kent, I will let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Scott. My name is Kent Boots, and I have over 25 years of experience in crash reconstruction, 14 of which were as an on-scene investigator for a major California Sheriff's Department. I'm also retired. I retired from law enforcement in 2006, and I have been working in the private sector since that time. I've been involved in crash data retrieval technology since 2002, and I'm certified as a CDR technician, analyst, and I'm also a certified trainer teaching others how to obtain and preserve crash data using the Bosch CDR tool.
Right. So for our objectives today, we'll briefly be going over crash investigation methodologies, what you're doing now and what else is available to you and out there. We'll be giving a brief overview of event data recorders, what they are and how they're used. We'll discuss some practical applications of how you can use EDR data to enhance your traffic accident investigations. We'll briefly discuss some privacy issues that are related to the collection of EDR data that you'll need to be familiar with. We'll go over the methods used to retrieve EDR data and the different tools that are available to do that. And finally, we'll talk about some training options that are available so that you can get the most out of applying crash data to your investigations. So let's start with crash investigation methodology. What are you doing now? We typically start an investigation by gathering party and witness statements. I found in my career that party statements often seem to be self-serving from the party of an accident that you're dealing with, and witness statements often included what they believe must have happened rather than what they actually saw. So statements, although necessary, can often create more questions about your case than provide answers. Scene diagrams, dynamics diagrams, scene documentation, collection of evidence. You're doing this in some way with different tools, creating diagrams and using those as part of your investigation. Ultimately, with major cases, some type of reconstruction, mathematical analysis is performed to answer questions related to speed, time distance, speed from skid, momentum, speed from crush, different methodologies that you're using. These are all very important. They're not going away. EDR data does not replace these methodologies that you're using in the mathematical analysis. However, these results, your mathematical analysis, often result in ranges, minimum speed, that type of thing. So understand EDR data can be very useful in helping to narrow the ranges in your reconstruction in your math analysis. But what else is there? Crash data retrieval, EDR data. That's what we're going to be talking about today. EDR stands for Event Data Recorder, and we'll go into more detail about event data recorders in just a second. Neat thing about EDRs is they provide unbiased, reliable data. It's real facts, real data, not ranges or estimates. It's very powerful evidence that can often answer questions about your case that you may not be able to answer otherwise. So what is an event data recorder, Ken?
Every vehicle that has an airbag in it has an airbag control module, or ACM, and most airbag control modules contain an event data recorder, or EDR. So the EDR is a component installed in some module in the vehicle with the intent of recording specific technical and occupant information for a brief period of time leading up to, during, and after a crash. EDRs are not continuously recording data. Something has to happen in order for data to be recorded, and that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit later.
All right. And EDRs are typically a function of a vehicle safety system, as Kent mentioned. Primarily, EDRs are a function of the airbag control module. The overwhelming majority of vehicles that contain an EDR, the airbag control module, is the module that contains the data. Its primary function, you have to understand, of the ACM is to tell the car when to deploy an airbag. The EDR, or event data recorder, is a secondary function of that. Data may be contained in other modules as well within a vehicle that have EDR data, powertrain control modules, rollover sensors, and some others. But primarily, the airbag control module is the module that's going to be containing the data. So let's talk about the different types of data elements that you can expect to find in most event data recorders. Most EDRs contain the delta V, or change in velocity, related to a crash. Both longitudinal and lateral delta Vs are captured in most event data recorders. Most event data recorders record 5 seconds of pre-crash data. Pre-crash data is exactly that. It's pre-crash. What was happening 5 seconds before impact? Many EDRs record this data in 1 second or half-second intervals and include things like vehicle speed. So how fast was the car going 5 seconds before the impact, 4 seconds before, 3 seconds before? Other common pre-crash data elements include brake status. When were the brakes applied? 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds before the crash. Throttle position, steering input, seatbelt status, occupant detection, and a lot more of these data elements are included as pre-crash data. NHTSA worked on setting some minimum standards on the types of data that must be recorded in certain EDRs, but the auto manufacturers aren't limited to the amount of data or types of data that can be recorded. So some EDRs also record things such as ABS activity. Was the ABS system activated? If so, when? Okay. Stability control, status, time between events, tire pressure warning light. The tire pressure warning status is great evidence for a driver's claim that a tire blowout caused them to lose control. So those type of data elements are contained there as well. The gear selector position is contained in some event data recorders, also the vehicle roll angle, and there's a lot of other data elements that are included by the different manufacturers in some of the systems. So what constitutes an event as far as an event data recorder is concerned? Ken?
There are various sensors in the vehicle that are monitoring what is happening around the vehicle as it drives down the road. And so when something bad happens, some physical occurrence, typically a crash, that causes a trigger threshold to be met. And alternatively, some supplemental restraint, such as an airbag in a vehicle, could deploy, signifying the event. And so in simple terms, there are two basic thresholds that can trigger data to be recorded to an EDR. So that leads us to the fact that there are realistically two types of events.
Okay, and the two types of events are a deployment event. A deployment event occurs when a safety system in a vehicle is deployed. The most common of which is the airbag. If the airbag's deployed, that constitutes an event that triggers the data to be recorded to the airbag control module. There are other systems, though, that can be deployed that trigger a deployment event as well, such as seatbelt pretensioners or other pyrotechnic deployment devices in a vehicle. There's also a non-deployment event. So an airbag or system does not have to be deployed to trigger an event to capture the data on the event data recorder. This occurs when a vehicle experiences some type of physical occurrence, again, most likely a crash, and it meets a certain threshold that triggers the data to be recorded. Both deployment and non-deployment thresholds are determined and set by the auto manufacturers. So let's go over some applications for use. How can you use this data, and how can it be useful for you and help you with your traffic investigations? First off, again, EDR data does not replace traditional accident investigation methodology and does not make them obsolete. EDR data may help you to fill in the gaps within your math analysis that can really help you narrow down the ranges in your findings. Ultimately, EDR data validates your findings. You'll be a lot more confident with your findings in your analysis when you have EDR data that backs them up. So let's go over a couple types of cases here. A deceased driver, you got a single vehicle fatal accident, no witnesses. The EDR data can be very useful here. Your pre-crash speed, pre-crash braking, pre-crash steering input, and all the other data elements you'll have access to. This may be the only evidence that gives you any insight as to the physical actions of a driver leading up to a crash. The driver's deceased, there were no witnesses. What was the driver doing? Often this information can't be determined by the physical evidence at the scene. So EDR data can be really incredibly powerful and useful in these types of cases. Multiple impact collisions, such as an inline chain reaction crash. Who hit whom first? Your parties are all pointing fingers at each other. You don't have any witnesses. Physical evidence at the scene in this type of case will likely not answer the question of who hit whom first. You're left with unknown as to the cause of your crash. None of us as accident investigators like to say, I don't know, or leave unknown as the cause of your crash, doing what you do. So EDR data can be real useful in these types of cases. So how can it be useful? In this example, data was downloaded from the gray car in the middle of this inline chain reaction crash, and it showed two separate events or impacts occurred in rapid succession. The data showed that the first impact in this series of impacts had a positive delta V. That indicates the gray car was pushed forward. And the second impact showed a negative delta V, indicating that it hit an object, in this case, the white car in front of it. Again, with physical evidence at the scene, you probably couldn't answer that question. What are you left with? Damage to the vehicles, some small skid marks on the road. But what was the order of impacts? EDR data can answer that question for you. In a momentum analysis, how can EDR data be used to help in these types of cases? You have your typical intersection crash. As part of a momentum analysis, you'll need to determine the post-impact speed of each vehicle. The gray car in this example slid to a stop on asphalt, so it's relatively simple to determine the exit speed of the gray car using your speed from skid formulas and whatnot. The red car went into a broad slide, slid across the intersection, and wrapped itself around a pole on the corner of the intersection. This presents some challenges, doesn't it? Well, for the red car, determining the speed in this first segment is relatively easy. Again, it's sliding across pavement, and you can use your basic speed from skid formulas. to determine in that segment the speed of the red car, and in our example here determined to be 27 miles per hour. But how do you account for the speed loss from the side impact into the pole? The EDR may record multiple events throughout this crash sequence: the initial impact with the gray car, the contact with the curb, anything else that's going along this, and ultimately it may capture the impact with the pole. So analyzing the data, the lateral delta V associated with the impact with the pole in our example here showed the delta V to be 12 miles per hour. So using a standard combined speed formula, the total speed was determined to be about 29.5 miles per hour. And the use of the EDR data really helps narrow down the estimates or ranges in your speed calculations, especially if you're dealing with combined speeds. If you have a range in your speed from skid segment, you have a range in another segment, and you have a range with it impacting the pole, put all those ranges together and you broaden out your range. EDR data in this case, giving you an accurate delta V when it struck the pole, can really help narrow the ranges down for your exit speed in a momentum analysis. How about a time distance analysis? Don't a lot of your cases boil down to time and distance? Where was party one when party two became a hazard? Answering this question with physical evidence can often be really difficult. Primarily, we base this stuff off of skid marks. With impending skid and ABS braking involved, good luck with that sometimes. Perception and reaction are huge components of a time distance analysis that often cause for a lot of assumptions on our case. The generally accepted, everyone's familiar with this, the 1.5 second perception reaction time. That sound familiar? Just plug that in as your perception reaction time and go from there. What if you could really narrow that down? It makes a time distance analysis a lot more accurate. Perception time is very subjective. We know that. Was the driver looking forward? Were they paying attention? Were they on the phone? That question may not be able to be answered definitively. But reaction, on the other hand, when did the braking start? And where was the car when braking started? Remember, how are you determining that now? Skid marks? It can be pretty difficult and not so accurate basing all of that off of skid marks, especially with ABS involved. So when did braking start? EDR data gives us pretty precise time relative to impact as to when the brakes were applied. In this example, we can see that the brakes were off 4.5 seconds prior to impact and on 4 seconds prior to impact. The neat thing about EDR data is it also gives us the speed the vehicle was traveling when that occurred. So where was the car when braking started? If we have time and we have speed, can't we calculate distance? So in this example, I was able to calculate the distance with the beginning and ending velocities for each half-second segment and then add them together. Didn't take much time, didn't take a whole lot of work, but I was easily able to determine that the vehicle was about 63 feet from impact when the brakes were applied. Again, you likely could not have determined that with any degree of accuracy or this degree of accuracy with the physical evidence at the scene. A level of accuracy using EDR data makes a huge difference in your findings. And I think once you start using this type of data and the different elements that are available and applying them to your crash, you'll find is really helpful information. Your cases are often time sensitive as law enforcement officers. Agency liability cases, your admin may not be too horribly concerned about your typical fatality in your city. It's a bad thing. Bad things happen, but that's your job. Go do your investigation and go do what you do. But if a police car runs a red light on a code run and crashes, they want answers yesterday. These cases draw a lot of media attention. Other high-profile cases, whether it's a police car that crashed and injured somebody, a school bus crash, and the media is now involved. Having fast, basic information. EDR data is fast. It gives you, once you download the data and you have the report and you're looking at it, you've got some real quick answers to your questions. You may not be done with your investigation, but you can feed that basic information to your public information officer, and they can posture themselves how they're going to deal with the media. Having that information, once you start doing that and feeding them that information, they're really going to appreciate that. For law enforcement, if you have a driver in custody on a case, the arraignment clock is ticking. You have 72 hours to charge your driver. Having the data, the basic data, understanding some basic things about the crash without having to do your whole workup, and that you may not complete your investigation, but you have basic hard facts about the case, and it will help you determine what type of charges you may be looking at to keep your driver in custody. How about improper road design lawsuits? We all seem to have those intersections in our cities where crashes just seem to happen all the time for no real reason, but I know you have those intersections where it seems there's a crash all the time. Inevitably, someone's going to get sued, and deep pockets generally point to your city. EDR data provides information about what was happening before the crash. In this example, the northbound speed limit's 45 miles per hour. A momentum analysis that you may have conducted yielded a speed range for the northbound car of, say, 44 to 49 miles per hour. Even on the high end, is 49 miles an hour an issue for you in a 45 zone? Not in most cases, but EDR data showed that the northbound car was traveling 63 miles per hour 5 seconds before impact. That's all occurring before the evidence even starts at your scene. It's evidence you can't get anywhere else. So was road design the issue? Oh, there should have been a stop sign there. There should have been a signal light. There was a line of sight issue. There's something with the road design that caused this. Or was it the speed of the northbound driver that you couldn't capture that speed? You couldn't determine that with physical evidence at the scene, but the EDR data was able to provide that for you. Was that the issue? You start feeding your city attorney information like this, and they're going to be looking for it in a lot of your cases. It's really powerful information. What about seatbelt use? Seatbelt use really has no impact in determining the cause of a collision, but I spent hours in a deposition going over pictures of stretched webbing of a seatbelt, seatbelt retractors, pretensioner devices, and such, trying to explain that the driver was or wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Why is that? Life insurance. Some policies won't pay if the driver wasn't wearing their seatbelt, and you end up in a deposition explaining your findings, or a civil trial for that matter, trying to answer that question. And it really helps to have EDR data that backs up or corroborates your finding in that case. So it's not just your opinion. You have the actual data that backs up your opinion, and it can shut down speculation on a lot of issues. And court testimony in general. Bottom line is you're the first responder as a police traffic officer. You have the ability to get the data first, apply it to your case. The use of EDR data has really become prevalent in traffic cases, both in criminal trials and civil trials for that matter. Prosecutors around the country are becoming more and more aware of EDR data and how it's used. And some of the feedback I've been getting around the country is that a lot of prosecutors, if EDR data is available in one of the cars they're dealing with, they won't issue a case if EDR data is available and they haven't seen it. They know that if EDR data is available, the opposing counsel will have it, and that's becoming pretty prevalent as well. You don't want to be surprised in court with information you hadn't considered. So EDR data is really powerful and becoming pretty prevalent in court cases around the country. Before we go any further, we should probably talk about some of the privacy issues that are related to EDR data. Kent, can you talk about the privacy issues?
Sure. In 2015, the Driver Privacy Act came into play, which is a federal statute, and it established A couple of things. Number one, who owns the data? And then it also established that no one is allowed to access or obtain the EDR data without the owner's consent or a court order, or as far as criminal matters are concerned, a search warrant. And so every state's going to be different. And so what we recommend for everyone is learn what the local laws are in your state, and make sure you either have, again, in the case for law enforcement, that you either have a search warrant or written consent. And then in the private sector, we're dealing with written consent.
So let's talk about retrieving the data itself. How do we access this data? How do we get it, Kent?
Well, there are basically two ways to communicate with a module in the car. And again, in most cases, we're dealing with the airbag control module in the vehicle, but there are other modules that can contain data, as Scott pointed out earlier. And so there's basically two ways to communicate with the airbag control module. And in a perfect world, the first and often simplest method is through the vehicle's data link connector, diagnostic link connector. DLC is the acronym for that, or OBD2 port. And that is what's depicted in the picture here. That is a standardized port on every vehicle since 1996, and it's primarily used for vehicle diagnostics. And so in most cases, again, that's how we're going to get the data, but in some cases it might be necessary to connect directly to the module that contains the data. And so when we're getting the data from the car, we typically have to have two things present. First of all, we need an intact electrical system. So 12-volt power in the vehicle needs to be available, and there needs to be that intact electrical system. And needless to say, that's not always the case when you're dealing with a wrecked or a severely damaged vehicle. So our power source for electronics, things like radios and headlights and the airbag control module in a passenger vehicle, even hybrids, is the 12-volt battery. So that power in the vehicle is distributed via the electrical system and wiring to these various systems and components, including the airbag control module that we're interested in getting data from. And so second to that, we have to have the vehicle's ignition key. In most cases, we need to be able to turn the key on in order to complete that circuit and provide power to the airbag control module. So, when you think about it, I'm not trying to start this vehicle, probably not going to be able to, but I need to be able to turn the key on to send that power on to the airbag control module. So in these cases where we do have severely damaged vehicles and that electrical system has been compromised, then we're not going to be able to obtain data through the diagnostic port. Under those circumstances, we're going to have to go direct to module. And ideally, we do that while that module is still bolted into the vehicle. So we eliminate any question, that this module, belongs in this vehicle. We eliminate any allegations that, as to what vehicle this module came out of. And so essentially what we're doing is we're disconnecting that wiring harness, that yellow cable. We're disconnecting that from the module, and then we're going to use a vehicle and module specific cable to connect to the airbag control module. In some situations, again, depending on the damage, it may be necessary to remove that airbag control module from the vehicle, and then we could collect data on a benchtop or some other work surface, as you see in the bottom image here. And so either method, whether we're getting data through the OBD port or whether we're going direct to module, either method provides the circumstances under which crash data should be able to be collected from an airbag control module.
Okay, let's go over the different EDR retrieval tools that are on the market that cover the different various auto manufacturers. We'll be concentrating on the Bosch CDR tool. It's the industry standard tool that supports the majority of the auto manufacturers. And then we'll briefly discuss the other EDR retrieval tools that are available for specific manufacturers. And those include Tesla, the Hyundai EDR tool, the Kia EDR tool, Mitsubishi tool, and also the Subaru EDR tool. As mentioned, the Bosch CDR tool is the industry standard EDR data retrieval tool. It supports over 50 brands of vehicles across more than 18 auto manufacturers. The Bosch CDR tool, as well as the other tools we'll be discussing, supports passenger cars, light trucks, and SUVs. The tools do not support heavy trucks or buses, commercial trucks. There are some EDR tools available for heavy trucks and buses, but we're not going to be discussing those today. The ones we're going to be discussing support your passenger cars, light trucks, and SUVs on the road today. The Bosch tool consists of both software and hardware components to access and download the data contained in event data recorders. It should be noted that the Bosch CDR tool, as well as the others we're going to be talking about for that matter, images or copies the data contained in an EDR. It does not alter, erase, or manipulate the data. They're designed that way. You can't change the data. You can't erase it. You can't manipulate it. You can't move it around or do anything to change it. It simply images or copies the data. And once the data is imaged, the software component of the tools translate the data into a human readable form known as the CDR report with the Bosch tool. The Bosch CDR Pro Tool kit sells for $7,100. It's available through Crash Data Group. The kit contains all of the hardware needed to access and download data from any of the supported vehicles in the Bosch system through a vehicle's OBD port. It also includes 1-year CDR software subscription. The Bosch software is sold as a subscription because it's constantly being updated. It's not like a standalone computer program that you just install on your computer and use as is forever. It's constantly being updated. New vehicle coverage, next year's models, new manufacturers or existing manufacturers that are added to the Bosch platform would be contained in an update. Any changes to or updates to existing data parameters may be contained in an update as well. The current price for 1-year subscription renewal is $1,050, but again, the first year of software is included in the price of the Pro Toolkit. As mentioned, airbag control modules, if you need to download directly by connecting to an airbag control module, ACMs vary by auto manufacturers. They have a similar shape, a similar size. Some are constructed out of steel, aluminum, plastic. They all have a unique connector on them, and therefore there's a specific connection cable that matches the connector on all the different airbag control modules or other modules that contain the data that are out there. Currently in the Bosch system, there's over 85 different direct-to-module cables and adapters. As far as the cost of those, they're sold individually. They're typically $165 each. And the software is going to indicate which of those cables that you need for the vehicle that you're working with. Cable bundles are also available. They range in price from $7,600 to $15,000, depending on your needs and budget. So that's the direct-to-module capability of the Bosch tool and the different components that are available. Again, Bosch is the industry standard tool, supports the overwhelming majority of auto manufacturers with EDR capability. Tesla EDR retrieval capability became available just last year. The hardware kit sells for $995. It also is available through Crash Data Group. It contains all of the hardware needed to download any Model S, Model X, or Model 3 Tesla, both by the in-vehicle connection and direct-to-module. The software component for the Tesla system is provided free of charge through Tesla. Tesla controls the software. They manage the software. Go to Tesla's website, download the software for free, and then use the hardware components of the kit to connect to the vehicle. Simply download the data file, upload that through Tesla's website again. The data is translated and an EDR report is generated in the form of a PDF document for the Tesla system. The Hyundai EDR tool supports 2013 and newer model Hyundais. It has both OBD and direct-to-module capability. The Hyundai tool sold through GIT of America. It sells for about $6,500 and has an annual software fee of $495. The Kia EDR tool also supports 2013 and newer model Kias. It has both OBD and direct-to-module download capability as well. The Kia tool sold through Snap-on and sells for about $7,100 and has an annual software fee of $495. The Subaru EDR tool supports select 2012 and 2014 Subaru models and then all 2015 and newer model Subarus. It has OBD download capability only. So with the Subaru tool, there's no way to connect directly to an airbag control module. You'll need to communicate with that through the OBD port using the Subaru tool. It sells for about $5,900 and has an annual software fee of about $2,700. Mitsubishi has an EDR tool that supports select 2011 and 2012 models and then all 2013 and newer model Mitsubishi vehicles. It also only has OBD capability, so there's no way to connect directly to the module containing data. It sells for about $6,400 and has an annual software fee of about $1,200. And those are the different tools that are available for passenger cars, light trucks, and SUVs. So with that, why don't we talk about training and training that's available with this. It's highly recommended that you receive some form of training, both on how to physically use the equipment and then how to use the recovered data to apply to your investigations. As far as online training, Crash Data Group has put together an online training course of how to use the Bosch CDR tool. It's a great foundational course on how to physically use the software and hardware components of the Bosch tool to perform a download and generate a report. The online course does not go into how to use the data, analyze it, or apply it to your investigations. There are a number of training organizations around the country that provide varying levels of classroom and hands-on training. Kent, you are a trainer. There are different levels of training that are available, and why don't you go through those?
Sure. The first is the technician or operator, and that's usually a 2-day class, and that training will certify the individual as a technician or operator, and that certification is giving them the skill set to go out and use the equipment and use the software to collect the EDR data and then ultimately how to preserve that. And that's where that training stops. And then beyond that, there's a separate class, CDR analyst or analysis class. That's usually a 5-day, a 40-hour class. And that class goes into looking at examples of EDR data and incorporating that into your investigation. And then once a year in Houston, in March, we do a Train the Trainer class that I'm part of. And in that class, we bring in individuals who want to be certified as trainers. And so that would allow an individual, say from an insurance company or an engineering firm, to come in and get certified as a trainer to go back and teach people at their company and certify them as technicians. And in the case of law enforcement, an individual in that class could then go back to their agency and train and certify officers of their department to the technician level.
Great. So that kind of concludes our presentation here today. Want to thank you all for joining us. Wanted to mention one thing. Crash Data Group is hosting the annual EDR Summit next month. It's March 4th through the 6th. It's in Houston, Texas. It's a great conference that focuses on the latest in EDR technology. Kent will actually be giving a presentation on advanced EDR data collection techniques, and I believe he'll be having some hands-on demonstrations as well. Bill Rose from Bosch will be going over the newly released CDR 900 vehicle interface, its current capabilities and future capabilities, a lot of information to share. There's a lot of great speakers covering a variety of topics related to EDR data collection and applications. It's a great conference. Like I say, it's coming up March 4th through the 6th in Houston. And you can find more information about the EDR Summit on Crash Data Group's website. I want to thank you all for attending today. We'll feel free to contact me if you have want more information or have some questions. My contact info is on the screen here. Either email me, scottc@crashdatagroup.com, or give me a call at the number there. Kent's contact info is there as well. So at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions. Thank you again for attending. Hope we answered some of the questions you may have had or were expecting to get information about. But if you have some questions now, there's a question function should be on a little toolbar on your screen. If you want to answer a few questions or ask a few questions, Kent and I will stick around and we'll go through those and try and answer as many questions as you have. But again, please feel free to contact me if you have any questions about the different tools or EDR data capabilities. All right. I got a question. Where are ACMs usually located in vehicles? Kent, I would imagine you've done far more diving into wrecked cars and finding the airbag control modules. Where are they typically located?
Well, they're basically going to be in really three main areas in the vehicle. One possible area, and this used to be in older vehicles, but I'm actually seeing this in some newer vehicles, is the airbag control module could actually be located under one of the seats, either the driver's seat or the passenger seat. And that's very rare, but it's still a possibility. The second area is in what we call the center tunnel. And the center tunnel is the center console area, and that can run from the back edge of the driver's seat all the way up to the dashboard. So if you dropped a string line down from the dashboard, it would be somewhere in there, usually in the area of the shifter or the emergency brake handle. And then the third area is they can actually be under the dash, still along the center line of the vehicle, but they can be between the dash and the firewall of the vehicle. So those are the three main areas.
Great. Question, have you been challenged at trial as to accuracy, acceptability, et cetera, of CDR data or EDR data? Not analysis of the data, but actually it looks like the question is, Kent, has EDR data been verified as accurate for court purposes?
Yeah, so EDR data has never been not allowed because it was inaccurate. The only time that it hasn't been allowed is if the expert themselves didn't qualify as an expert. But the data itself has there's never been any issues getting the data itself into court.
Okay. All right. Looks like someone is asking, they use the Bosch tool and they're asking, is there any possibility that Hyundai, Kia, or other manufacturers will be added to the Bosch system? Bosch is constantly working with auto manufacturers, trying to add more manufacturers to the Bosch product line. They have announced that they have indicated that they're hoping to announce 2 additional manufacturers added to the Bosch platform relatively soon. We don't know who those are. They're under contracts with the manufacturers they're working with to add to the Bosch system, and they can't do that until all that's done. As far as Hyundai and Kia goes, at last year's EDR Summit, Bosch had indicated that they were not in talks with Hyundai and Kia. So although I don't know of anything about Hyundai or Kia, last I heard they were not in any talks specifically with Hyundai or Kia. But like I say, they've indicated that relatively soon they're expected to announce 2 additional manufacturers are going to be added to the Bosch CDR tool. All right. Are there any other questions? Anyone else? Doesn't appear so. So with that, for actually a few more coming in, so Kent, if you can stay with me. Question was asked about does Crash Data Group or other businesses stock other than the Bosch EDR tool for overnight shipment? Crash Data Group, I can speak for us. We stock the Bosch CDR tool and all the components, all the direct-to-module cables, adapters, everything in the Bosch product line we stock and can overnight. We also are the distributor for the Tesla EDR hardware retrieval kit. We have those in stock and can overnight ship them. The other tools, the Hyundai tool, Kia tool, Mitsubishi and Subaru are sold by other businesses. I'm not sure of their availability and how fast they're able to ship those products. But as far as the Bosch tool and Tesla tool, Crash Data Group handles those and it has those in stock. Someone was asking about a presentation about heavy truck data retrieval. Ken, you probably have more information about heavy truck EDR tools that are out there. What insight can you provide to someone or a resource? Where could you direct them if they wanted more information about the heavy truck EDR tools?
Off the top of my head, I can't give you the website. Veer, V-E-A-R, is a company out there that does heavy truck data collection, and they actually have an app that you can download, at least for the Droid, and then they also have an interface on their website where you can put in a heavy truck VIN, and it will tell you what system that has, what equipment you need, you know, whether or not it supported that sort of thing. As far as a Crash Data Group presentation on that subject, that's probably not going to happen unless, you know, one of these other organizations that provides those services, you know, wants to do that, because it's not anything that Crash Data Group or I have involvement in.
There were some presentations at the EDR Summit in the past on heavy trucks and that, so that's a good resource as well for some of that. Let's see, a question came in. Does Crash Data Group or your company, Kent, Factual Diagrams, offer a rent for a short period of time? I can speak for Crash Data Group. We do not rent the equipment. We're a sales distributor, so we don't rent the equipment. Kent, as far as your company goes?
I do not, and it's my understanding that renting the equipment violates the end user license agreement. But I am aware of people out there that do, but I think what they're renting is training and equipment that goes along with the training. If that makes sense. But I do not, and I don't know of anybody personally that does.
Okay. Another question related to heavy trucks. Would the heavy truck material be the same for buses like New Flyer or NABI? My understanding is, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the EDR tools for heavy trucks and buses, because those vehicles don't have airbag systems, there's no airbag control module, so it's not the traditional EDR that we're used to with passenger trucks, passenger cars, light trucks, and SUVs. But the heavy truck data is contained more in an engine computer or a transmission computer or something like that. Is that your understanding as well? So it may be the same for buses if they have the same type of engine or engine computer that's in some of the heavy trucks. Are you and I kind of on the same page on that?
Yeah, first of all, hey Rich, that is correct. So like on a heavy truck that would have a Caterpillar engine in it, for example, or a D-deck or something along those lines, the engine control unit, if the bus had a similar system, and I would suggest, if you've got a VIN laying around for a bus, Rich, you could go to Veer's website and put that VIN in, and it would tell you what type of system that would have. But my assumption is that it would be very similar to a heavy truck. So it's not crash data. It's basically PCM data, but it's being monitored by the engine control unit in a big rig or a bus for a longer period of time.
I hope we answered that question. Any other questions before we close things off today?
And I just found that website for the heavy truck. So if anybody is interested in that, it is VEARINC.com. And on their website, you can get to the event data retrieval section where you can put in a VIN and have it tell you what system that vehicle might have.
Okay, I don't see any other questions coming through. We'll stick around maybe for another half minute or so to see if anyone has another question. And if not, then we'll be concluding things here today. For those of you that are still present with us, again, I want to thank you for taking the time and hearing us out. I hope you got some information that you find useful. Again, if you have any other questions about specifically, in my case, the Bosch tool or the Tesla tool, please feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to talk to you, answer your questions. That's what we're here for. The other tools, like I say, are available from other suppliers, and I'm not too familiar with how they work, but I could certainly point you in that direction and answer any questions that I have can as well. And that looks like we'll be wrapping things up. Again, thank you so much. So we'll be closing the webinar, and again, I appreciate your attendance today.